Okay, let's jump right into something that, well, it often feels like pure science fiction, doesn't it? But maybe it's actually closer to science fact.
Uh-huh.
If you've ever encountered that, strange, sometimes utterly alien information that can surface during psychedelic experiences.
Oh, yeah. The complex geometries, the feeling you're tapping into some kind of impossible knowledge.
Exactly. You're left with this really profound question, where on Earth, or maybe not on Earth, is that coming from?
And, for anyone thinking purely in evolutionary terms, this presents a real puzzle, a big one.
How so?
Well, nature is usually incredibly focused on efficiency, right? Every biological function, it's generally tied pretty tightly to survival and reproduction.
Makes sense. Don't waste energy.
Right. So why would evolution equip us with this capacity to access what seems like vast amounts of, well, non-local information,
So,
stuff about other dimensions maybe, information that appears on the surface totally irrelevant to finding dinner or, avoiding a saber-toothed cat.
yeah, it doesn't seem very practical in that sense.
It almost feels like a glitch in the system, the evolutionary system.
Hmm.
Or maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a sign that the system itself is far, far stranger than we usually assume.
It really does challenge that simple model of evolution, doesn't it? It's like having, I don't know, a supercomputer's bandwidth when all you really needed was a basic calculator for survival.
That's a good way to put it.
But what if this source of seemingly alien information, this whole mystery, what if it could find its explanation in one of the most counterintuitive corners of physics?
You mean like really out there?
Yeah, an idea so weird, so initially dismissed as just pure woo-woo, that mainstream science basically ran screaming in the other direction for a while.
Ah, okay. I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where this deep dive is taking us, isn't it?
It is. We're going to explore the sources you've provided today to try and connect the dots between the psychedelic experience, the nature of imagination, and this experimentally verified, deeply strange reality called quantum non-locality.
Right. So the mission today is really to unpack how this connection suggests our minds, maybe our consciousness itself, might actually be accessing some kind of universal field of information.
Exactly. So let's unpack this. To really get the roots of this idea, we probably need to go back, way back, to the foundational days of quantum theory. We're talking the 1920s.
Yeah, fascinating time.
Hmm.
Physics was at this real fork in the road. Competing theories popping up, trying to describe the fundamental nature of reality itself.
So what were the main contenders?
Well, you had different models on the table. The one that ultimately won out, the one that became the standard understanding, the one most people have probably heard of, is the Heisenberg-Bohr model.
Right, and that's famous for.
Its defining kind of peculiar feature, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Ah, yes, the uncertainty principle. That one really captured the public imagination, didn't it? It seemed to offer this sort of mystical bridge, maybe, between cold, hard science and subjectivity.
Yeah, like a scientific basis for things feeling a bit fundamentally uncertain,
Yeah.
at the very core.
So what does it actually say, simply put?
Well, what it famously states is that for tiny particles like electrons, you just can't simultaneously know both its exact position and its exact momentum or velocity with perfect precision.
Mm-hmm.
The more accurately you try to measure one of those properties, the less accurately you can know the other one. It's a trade-off.
And the key was, this wasn't just about our clumsy measuring tools.
No, that was the revolutionary part. Uncertainty wasn't just a limitation of our instruments. It was supposedly built into the fabric of reality itself. That was the standard interpretation.
So the accepted view became, well, that's just how it is down there at the fundamental level. It's inherently fuzzy. But the sources you sent highlight that at the famous Council of Copenhagen meeting, where all the physics giants hashed this out, there was another theory.
Yes, exactly. There was another equally valid mathematical theory on the table proposed by David Bohm.
David Bohm. Okay.
And here's a really critical point, one that often gets overlooked. Mathematically, Bohm's theory made the exact same predictions as Heisenberg's model.
Wait, the same predictions down to the decimal point.
Precisely. You'd run the numbers using Bohm's equations, you'd run them using Heisenberg's, and the answers would match perfectly. They were experimentally indistinguishable based on the math alone.
Okay. Identical math, identical predictions. So why on earth did they choose Heisenberg's model and basically sideline Bohm's? What was the deal breaker?
Well, because, Heisenberg's theory had this odd uncertainty principle, which was definitely counterintuitive, but maybe, acceptable weirdness.
Yeah.
Bohm's theory had something else baked in,
Do you think weirder?
something inherent. You couldn't get rid of it. And it was considered so utterly bizarre, so far outside the bounds of classical physics thinking, that the scientific community, well, they essentially recoiled from it.
Recoiled. Strong word.
Yeah. They saw it as producing ghosts, as introducing craziness into physics. And they pretty much opted for Heisenberg specifically to avoid this, well, this woo-woo element, as the source calls it.
Then that completely unpalatable element, that craziness,
Yeah.
that was the prediction of non-locality.
That's the one. Non-locality. Bohm's model predicted, inescapably, that any two particles which have interacted at some point in the past remain instantaneously connected.
No matter how far apart they get.
No matter the distance separating them, doesn't matter how much ordinary, Newtonian space is between them, they remain linked by what the sources describe as a kind of, well, magic.
Okay, the classic example always used is you have two particles, maybe they came from the same atom decaying or something.
Same source, entangled.
You measure or affect one particle's property here, say its spin,
Uh-huh.
and its partner particle, which could literally be, as the source says, on opposite sides of the universe.
Instantly responds.
Instantly.
Yep.
It
Yeah.
flips its corresponding property simultaneously.
Simultaneously. There's no time delay,
Mm-hmm.
no signal traveling between them, not in the way we normally think of signals. It's faster than light. It's instantaneous.
Wow. And, okay, thinking about the Big Bang.
Exactly. Based on the standard model of the universe, where everything, all matter and energy, started out compressed into this tiny point, smaller than a proton.
Wow.
If non-locality is real, this has a absolutely profound implication.
Which is?
It means that every single particle in the entire universe was at one point intimately associated with every single other particle.
Oh, wow.
So if Bohm was right, changing the state of a particle right here, right now, could instantaneously affect, potentially, all other particles everywhere else in the cosmos.
That's truly mind-bending. Okay, so Bohm predicted this bizarre connection based on his math. But, predicting something weird in a theory is one thing.
Right. Proving it exists in the real world is another kettle of fish entirely.
Exactly. And for a long time, actually testing non-locality seemed impossible, didn't it? It was confined to these Gedanken experiments, thought experiments.
That's right. Physicists could imagine scenarios, work them out on paper, but they couldn't really see how you'd build the apparatus.
Yeah.
How to actually test particles interacting instantly across large distances in a controlled, measurable way.
There were arguments about why it couldn't really be done on a lab bench.
Yeah, technical challenges, maybe philosophical objections to
Until the brilliant physicist John Bell came along.
Right. Enter John Bell. He figured out a way. He devised a method to actually perform a real-world physical experiment.
A practical test.
Yes, known as a Bell test.
Mm-hmm.
It's built on earlier ideas, like the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox. But Bell formulated it in a way that could actually settle the question of non-locality empirically, on a workbench.
Okay, the moment of truth. He designed it, he ran the experiment,
And as the source puts it so simply, lo and behold, it is so.
It's real. Non-locality is real. The very thing they rejected Bohm's theory for, the most woo-woo thing you can possibly imagine. It actually happens.
According to the experiments, yes. Overwhelmingly so. Bell's initial findings, they're described as robust. This wasn't some fluke result.
It's been repeated.
Oh, yeah. It's been repeated, verified, confirmed in literally hundreds of laboratories around the world since then. Different setups, different distances. The effect holds.
Wow.
This instantaneous connection across vast distances, non-locality, entanglement, it's a proven phenomenon of the universe we live in. And that right there, that's the absolutely critical nugget from this part of the discussion.
That quantum weirdness isn't just theory.
It's not just theoretical math on a blackboard. It's an experimentally verified fact of reality. The universe is non-local at a fundamental level.
Okay, so this fundamental interconnectedness at the quantum level, it's undeniably real, proven.
Yeah.
But, okay, how do we make the leap from that? From tiny particles acting weirdly to our conscious human experience, our thoughts, our imagination. It feels like such a massive difference in scale.
It does, but maybe we're not quite as separate from that quantum realm as we tend to assume.
How do you mean?
Well, consider something like the synaptic cleft in your brain. That tiny, tiny gap between neurons where signals pass.
Neurotransmitters jumping across.
Right. Now, think about a drug molecule, maybe a psychedelic molecule, binding to a receptor there. A single atom's position or movement on that molecule can literally change its overall shape just enough.
Just one atom.
Just one atom shifting slightly. But that tiny change can trigger a whole cascade of biochemical events that results in a, quote, fantastically different experience in your consciousness.
So a single quantum entity, an atom, can have these huge macroscopic effects on our subjective experience.
Exactly. It shows the micro affecting the macro directly right there in our own brains.
Yeah.
And there's another incredible direct example the sources bring up, the spinthariscope,
The spinthariscope, right? Tell us about that. It sounds like something from an old movie.
doesn't it? Apparently, this was actually a component in some old-school childhood chemistry sets, believe it or not.
No way.
Yeah. It was described as a little metal tube. At one end, there's a screen coated with phosphorus. Near that screen, there's a tiny needle tipped with a minuscule amount of radium,
Radium, okay. Radioactive.
highly radioactive, and you'd look through a little lens at the other end of the tube.
So what would you see?
Well, the magical experience, apparently, after letting your eyes adjust fully in the dark, was that you'd look in and see the twinkling of stars,
Wow. Little stars inside a tube.
which is just a beautiful description of what was physically happening. The radium nuclei were decaying randomly, unpredictably, and spitting out alpha particles. These particles would fly off and strike the phosphorus screen. Each time a particle hit a phosphorus atom,
It made a flash.
it would excite the atom, causing it to kick out a single photon, a single quantum of light, a tiny flash.
Okay, so you're seeing individual decay events as light flashes.
Exactly. But here's the truly astonishing insight you get from this simple old toy.
What's up?
It demonstrates that the human eye specifically, a single rod or cone cell in your retina, is sensitive enough to actually detect and respond to a single photon of light.
One photon. Our eye can register that.
It can. Think about that for a second.
Right.
As the source puts it so vividly, you, sweating primate creature, are actually looking down into the quantum mechanical level. Your own biological sensory apparatus is capable of perceiving single quanta.
That's incredible. Okay, so if a single atom's position can change our whole experience and our physical eyes can detect a single photon, maybe our minds, maybe our imagination is also operating on a level much closer to this fundamental quantum reality than we've generally acknowledged.
That is precisely the central idea being proposed here. The core suggestion
Which is?
that what we subjectively experience as imagination isn't just, random neurological noise or memory fragments shuffling around. It might actually be our perception of Bell non-local space.
Our perception of non-local space. Wow.
The idea is that we aren't just isolated biological machines. We are fundamentally embedded in this non-local information field. It permeates everything.
In this field, it's not just space. It's described as containing, well, everything.
That's the proposition. It's described as potentially containing all the information in the cosmos. Every event, every possible configuration of matter and energy, perhaps even stretching across past, present, and future possibilities. An infinite reservoir.
Whoa. Okay, that sounds completely overwhelming. How do we possibly function day to day if we're constantly awash in infinite cosmic information?
Good question. The theory suggests that our ordinary waking consciousness acts as a very effective filter. A reducing valve, almost.
How does it filter?
It enters this infinite field, this non-local space, and primarily recognizes only what is familiar, what fits our learned categories, our survival needs, our cultural conditioning.
And everything else?
Everything else, the vast, overwhelming majority of that potential information gets filtered out. It's defined by the brain as noise, essentially, and it simply doesn't register in our conscious awareness most of the time.
Okay. So then maybe those flashes of inspiration we get, those strange promptings, vivid dreams, moments of sudden clarity, or even those big psychedelic revelations, maybe they aren't pulling something totally new out of nowhere. Maybe there are instances where that filter momentarily thins out or becomes more permeable.
Exactly, and the imagination in those moments is actually transducing, sort of translating or picking up some of that previously filtered Bell non-local information.
It's like getting a glimpse through the static, through the noise.
Precisely. It's like suddenly tuning into a radio frequency you weren't even aware existed just moments before.
This opens up some really incredible implications, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Huge implications.
Like, consider something like the idea of alien contact. The source speculates that, well, if non-locality is real and connects everything instantly, maybe advanced beings from other galaxies don't actually need to bother with traversing impossible physical distances in clunky spaceships.
Because the universe is just too fast, right? And maybe our little corner, our island backwater, as the source calls it, isn't that interesting physically?
Exactly. So instead,
Contact could potentially be happening in the mind, through this non-local connection that completely bypasses the limitations of physical space and time.
So they could be galaxies away physically.
And you could still potentially connect, exchange information, or experience their presence via this underlying universal information field.
Wow. And this leads to a truly speculative but fascinating, provocative idea mentioned in the source for maybe facilitating collective alien contact.
Okay, I remember this bit. This is
Wild virtual realities, right? Designed by our most creative minds, maybe even guided by insights from psychedelics.
And the explicit goal is
To make these VR environments as utterly, profoundly alien as possible, pushed the boundaries of strangeness.
okay. Why? What's the thinking there?
The thinking seems to be that if imagination is genuinely tapping into this non-local field, a field containing all cosmic information, including potentially very alien forms of consciousness or reality structures,
Right.
then by deliberately trying to create something maximally alien within our own constructed reality, VR, we might eventually, accidentally or intentionally, hit upon a resonance. We might model something that actually corresponds to or connects with real alien information existing within that field.
So you build stranger and stranger worlds
Until, maybe, at some point, we will realize this is the real thing. That the alienness we've created isn't just human imagination anymore, it's plugging into something genuinely other. And we would have essentially, as the source puts it, landed the aliens on the net, not from the sky.
That completely flips the script on the whole SETI search for extraterrestrial intelligence thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Contact through consciousness mediated by technology.
Totally. And it expands way beyond just aliens, doesn't it? It goes to the very source of creativity itself.
Yeah, the source posits this non-local domain as basically the universal source of creativity, full stop.
The space containing, what was it? All events, all inventions, all arts, all sciences, all forms of magic.
Throughout this cosmos. Not just human stuff, but everything, everywhere.
In different times, different cultures, people might have had other names for this,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. You might hear it called God's mind, or the Akashic records, the collective unconscious, Plato's realm of forms. Similar ideas of some kind of universal intelligence or a library of everything accessed through intuition or revelation.
And the source suggests that maybe shamanism, ancient traditions accessing altered states, and scientific creativity and artistic creativity, they're not fundamentally different processes. They're a seamless phenomena.
All drawing water from the same, well, essentially.
Yeah.
All working out of this Bell non-local domain.
When you look at the history of big scientific breakthroughs,
Yeah.
we often like to tell this neat story of purely logical, step-by-step, incremental progress.
The standard textbook version.
Right. But so many of the truly revolutionary leaps, when you read the accounts of the discoverers themselves, they describe them differently.
How so?
As sudden insights, visions, flashes of understanding that came out of the blue, sometimes even in dreams, revelations almost, like Einstein's thought experiments imagining writing on a beam of light. That wasn't just calculation. Or Kekulé.
Kekulé and the benzene ring. The story goes he was dozing by the fire.
And dreamed of a snake biting its own tail, right? And boom, he understood the circular structure of the benzene molecule.
Exactly. A visual, symbolic revelation solving a major chemical puzzle. Or maybe the most profound, most ironic example mentioned.
Go on.
The origin story of modern scientific materialism itself. René Descartes.
Descartes. I think, therefore I am. Father of rationalism.
The very same. Often seen as the father of the modern scientific method, focused squarely on measurement, reason, objectivity. The whole idea of humanity's conquest of nature through measurement and number.
Okay. What about him?
He claims his foundational idea, the very basis for this rational, materialist approach, came to him in a series of 3 incredibly vivid dreams.
Dreams, Descartes.
Dreams. After a night out, apparently, in Ulm, Germany, back in 1621, he specifically described the central insight he received in these dreams as a revelation of an archangel.
Get out of here. The bedrock of modern rational science was founded on a mystical dream revelation from an archangel.
According to Descartes' own account, yes. The irony is just staggering, isn't it?
It really is. So the very framework of modern science, which often tends to dismiss subjective experience, dreams, mystical insights as irrelevant or unreal, was itself supposedly founded on exactly that kind of experience.
And the argument being made here is that psychedelics, well, they appear to be particularly powerful tools for amplifying our access to this domain, whatever this domain ultimately is.
They don't create the information then.
No, the idea isn't that they create it. It's more that they seem to widen the bandwidth or open the channel. Instead of getting that usual, familiar, narrow stream of data, the thin spaghetti thin line the source mentions, you suddenly get access to more, bigger pictures, clearer pictures, more frequent pictures from this vast underlying field of information. The suggestion is that maybe many of humanity's great inventions and creative leaps throughout history, from discovering fire to abstract art to scientific theories, came from individuals somehow tuning into this divine imagination.
And if that's even remotely plausible,
Then not actively studying and utilizing tools that enhance imagination, whether it's psychedelics, meditation, dream work, creative practices, as serious tools for exploration,
Yeah.
is like trying to understand reality or solve our biggest problems by deliberately playing the game with half a deck. We might be willfully ignoring our most powerful innate instrument for accessing fundamental knowledge and creativity.
wow. It certainly forces you, doesn't it, to reconsider the nature of creativity, intuition, those inexplicable aha moments we all have sometimes, and even the boundaries of your own consciousness.
Absolutely. Are they purely internal biochemical processes happening only inside your skull? Or are you, in those moments, momentarily making contact with something much, much larger?
Which really leaves all of us with this final thought to ponder, doesn't it?
What's that?
If, as these sources suggest, the very foundation of modern rational science itself might have emerged from a profound subjective revelation accessed through a dream. What incredible insights, what potentially world-altering inventions, what deeper understandings of ourselves and the cosmos are we potentially missing out on today?
By largely dismissing or even pathologizing the power of the imagination.
Exactly, and the tools that might amplify its connection to this fundamental source. What else is waiting for us out there, or maybe in there, in that experimentally verified, non-local field of information?
Please click like and then subscribe. Also share this video with your friends. Thank you.